Is there anybody there? It seems I'm all alone again. Does anybody care? This planet's empty. I see no signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Ah, oh. Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Wednesday, June 9th, 2021. Welcome to the Wednesday show with Cyril Mychalejko. Cyril is the progressive columnist from Bucks County Courier-Times and the Intelligencer, and also the amazing newsletter over on Substack. The Wednesday show is the latest addition to Raging Chicken's family of podcasts, joining Out to Coop Live, that's our Monday evening interview show, and our Friday Politics Roundup, in which Sean Kitchen and I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And you definitely got to also sign up for Cyril's newsletter on Substack. You can find the link right in today's show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, the link is right there. Make sure you subscribe to that. It's absolutely essential, where you can meet progressives from around the states. You can get the latest in the kind of roundup around the, what's happening in Pennsylvania. We'll be talking a little bit about that today. You can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Just go to patreon.com/rcpress. Your support has helped make today's show possible. It's true. We wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for our patrons. You can also help out today's show by heading on over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already, and smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you'll know every time that we go live. And make sure to join our Discord server to continue the conversation all week long, before, after the show, and into the night. Just click on the link in today's show notes for our Discord server. It's an open invite at this point. And a special shout out once again to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayman. That's with two N's, at SongADayman on Twitter. Well, on today's show, welcome back once again, Cyril Mychalejko. And today we're going to be talking, a little bit about his latest column. PA can support workers protecting the environment by funding public transport, and some stuff from his newsletter, which I think is especially timely. And the latest one is called Wither, Pennsylvania, QAnon, Bigotry, Coup Mongers, and sadly more. Welcome to the show once again, Cyril. Man, it's so great to be sitting here with you again.
Hey, great to be back.
Hey, so it's been quite a week at so many different levels. But I think it's been great to see some of the sharing that's been going on with your latest column that's focusing on public transport, really. And I think what you did in there too was broaden out that discussion beyond just we need better roads, right? You look at this kind of in a much kind of wider scope. So take us a little through kind of what you're kind of getting at that latest column and why this is kind of really significant to what's happening in PA right now.
Sure. I mean, I even touched on this earlier with my Earth Day column with the Thrive Agenda, which is all about how kind of infrastructure impacts us in so many different levels, including ecologically, right? One of the things I try to do is I just try to, I reach out to the community and see what the issues are that different folks are working on. And so, I kind of knew someone, just from social media that works with the conservation voters of Pennsylvania. And she told me about this. I was just like, wow, this is a huge issue. Wasn't even on my radar before. And I'm glad that she helped me put it on. And so essentially, back in 2013, the former Republican governor, Tom Corbett, signed a bipartisan legislation that secured public funding for transportation, right, including public transit. And the issue is that's sunsets next year, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea is that we need Harrisburg to kind of get off their butts, stop kind of wasting time suggesting that the election was rigged, right? And actually get down to passing something that's actually going to help the people of Pennsylvania, right?
Imagine that.
And so, yeah, and then what we see is that, something like public transit, or even you could say like transit justice, this impacts working class communities. It impacts communities of color, environmental justice communities, right? So, and the other thing is that there is no real urban-rural divide on this issue either,
Right, exactly.
as well, which is important.
Well, and I think there's even a case to be made, right? That there's a correct and kind of expansive public transportation policy, is going to have kind of like exponentially larger benefits in rural communities in many ways, right? Which are completely underserved by public transport.
Absolutely. And what we've seen, like with the pandemic, like even though there was like, like a drop in ridership because of like public health precautions and lockdowns, like essential workers relied on this, right? Whether it's Philadelphia, Harrisburg, York, Pittsburgh, everywhere in between, a good portion, and I would say probably a majority of essential workers needed public transportation. And public transit workers are essential workers in and of themselves as well. And then another thing I think that's like really important to kind of bring up, given like this looming like climate catastrophe that's kind of hanging over our heads, is just the environmental impact of this, right?
Exactly.
The American Lung Association just put out their annual report about the quality of air. Allegheny, Bucks, Montgo, Philly, all F, right, for like the ozone quality. Berks, Chester, Delaware, Northampton, D's. And the one thing that we know is that while the transportation sector accounts for like 30% of greenhouse gases, cars are the worst offender. And so they account for about 60% of the public transportation pollution.
Right. And the thing is there like, on the one hand, yes, 100%, we see this kind of boon in investment in electric vehicles. We see this happening from the federal level with the Biden plan, but also just kind of, private companies really kind of making the switch over to electric vehicles. But we could kind of miss the forest through the trees on this one if we're just folks like thinking that that's going to solve our problems, when really, to get to the drawdown on carbon emissions, right? For number one, we really have to start kind of investing in public infrastructure. And like you say in this column, is that the added bonus here, right, is that not only then do you kind of dramatically draw down kind of a carbon emissions, but you're actually kind of addressing long-standing kind of like, inequities, right, that are built in our society, especially with communities of color or rural, the rural-urban divide, and providing access to more people, right, to solve problems, right? So, this just seems like a win-win-win across the board in the investment in public transit.
Yeah, and I hope so. I hope they have the the vision and the forward thinking to kind of like go big on this, because it's not the capital improvements that we need to just for like uptake. We need to expand, right? We need to expand public transportation, expand access to different communities, and just kind of promote and expand ridership. Because if we grow ridership and kind of create the conditions where people are less reliant on cars, that's going to have a huge impact moving forward with the environment.
Well, I think about this. We've got rail lines that run right through Percy, right where I live, and there used to be a trolley system that used to run directly from Percy and further south all the way up to Allentown and beyond. Right. In addition to a train line that came through, right, and but beyond that, right. So you can imagine, just like revitalizing those kind of existing lines. They're still there, right? But obviously they've been laying dormant for a long time. But I imagine even things like, what if we really expanded public transit, to like between Percy, say, and Doylestown. Right, because anybody who's ever driven on Route 313, right, that kind of runs kind of the length of the county in Upper Bucks. I mean, it's like a disaster. I mean, it's a 2-lane highway that's like carrying four lanes of traffic. And instead of trying to widen the road, if you were actually simply just kind of better the public transport system, and that could be clean buses, that could be light rail, that could be trial right across the board. We could be very imaginative on that. That would improve the quality of life of everyone that's involved. Right?
No, absolutely, that would be amazing. And like you were saying, like I think one one kind of goal is to kind of transition to like a zero carbon public transit. So like electric buses, even electric school buses, right? To take the kids to school. That would be another thing. And you just kind of like gave me flashbacks of nightmares of driving 313.
I'm sorry for that. Well, I can tell you, it's only gotten worse. So, it's really true because, I mean, anybody, again, Bucks County is one of the many counties that, has these large rural components that it's slowly getting sold off to house farms. And sold off to kind of like more development. Every time that there's an improvement in infrastructure in terms of the roads, usually what that's followed immediately is people selling off their farmland in order to kind of, build more houses, which then just kind of, increases the problem all over again. And I like what you said, also in this column where you're saying, look, while there may be a promise moving forward where there might be a one-time influx of federal funds to help support this stuff, really we've got to be putting the pressure on Harrisburg, right? We cannot just kind of saying like, magic's going to happen and then we'll let the federal government take care of it. But really, we need our state legislators to kind of get out ahead of this and think beyond just filling potholes, but thinking about kind of, the next generation of infrastructure in the state.
And it's a job, it's a job creator, right? So like by investing in infrastructure, you're kind of creating the conditions where you're creating union jobs, right? Good paying jobs, jobs with benefits, jobs that let people have, comfortable middle class, lives and to be able to take care of their families. And I think that's like another thing that kind of can get overlooked. I mean, right now what we're waiting for is, so Governor Wolf put together this Transportation Revenue Commission, right? So with like different stakeholders. Unfortunately, it's like a little heavy with like the highway folks. But regardless, they're due to issue a report from on August 1st. So I think after that comes out, then we can kind of see like what kind of ideas that they're playing around with. And I would expect that, this would start like moving forward at a more accelerated clip.
Yeah, well, let's hope. And so here's a big question, and this kind of is like directly related to what you're writing in your newsletter this week. This is the time which we 100% we need our state legislature to be reasonable and act in a coherent fashion for the people of Pennsylvania. And yet, on the flip side of the hope, right, comes the concern. And you've got this piece that came out in your newsletter this week, and that's called Bucks County Progressive, right? And make sure you sign up for that. CyrilMychalejko.substack.com. And you're kind of breaking down what we've been talking about on this show, right? A little bit already, what you started talking about since your column began over in the Bucks County Courier Times and Intelligencer, that we have concerns about whether that's going to be possible, and all the more reason to be paying attention to this kind of increase of crazy, pardon my word, but into the kind of like political bloodstream of the Commonwealth. So I mean, you better than me to walk through kind of some of the things that you're highlighting here on in that. No, newsletter.
I mean, I think what you said is just absolutely right, and what we're dealing with. Well, my concern first is just like we're at a critical junction right now in Pennsylvania, and the idea is like which way is Pennsylvania going to turn? Because while there are growing pockets of progressivism like in Bucks County, and while our progressive movement's growing. At the same time, I'd be lying if I said that, the QAnon wing of the Republican Party wasn't growing as well, right? And unfortunately, right now, we see because of, gerrymandering over the years that they have control over the legislature in Harrisburg. So, yeah, like one of the things I think like it's really important to highlight is this growing extremism that's that we're witnessing right before our eyes, whether it's from school boards, right, to state reps, to state senators, to the Republican gubernatorial candidates, and I think like you have like this conspiracy-addled paranoia compounded with like a healthy dose of bigotry, and those are the two wrongs that make the right in Bucks County and throughout Pennsylvania, if not across the country.
Right, and that's the capital R right on that one. Well, yeah, exactly. And, and you've been, I mean, I think this has been a service to all of us, like in the county. You've been highlighting, we've talked about the school board races before, but in that latest newsletter, right, you kind of remind people that, you wrote about this Keeping Kids in School PAC in Bucks County and some of the candidates that were being supported by this. And you offer this, right, quote, Cora Landis, a QAnon supporter running for Palisades School Board, believes FEMA camps will be used for reindoctrination of conservatives, promotes hydroxychloroquine as a COVID cure, and thinks George Floyd protesters are, quote, using black to create anarchy, and tweets, quote, we already had a minority Muslim in the White House. We should learn from our mistakes. Right? These are her public statements as she's running for school board, right? I mean, this is what we're talking about. And I can't, I do want to kind of get your thoughts a little bit about what's happening in the, say, gubernatorial race and kind of how that kind of reinforces what you're talking about here. But I can't help but let people just in on what you sent me this morning, right? Is Andy Meehan, who's actually, one of the kind of, foot soldiers on the right in Bucks County, has got like a music video out glorifying the January 6th insurrection. Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I would say like Andy Meehan, he ran against, Congressman Fitzpatrick. He primaried him because he thought Fitzpatrick was a quote unquote rhino. And he runs the voter education and outreach organization called Right for Bucks. Now, Meehan is he's QAnon, right? Like when he announced his campaign,
right. I mean,
there's just
overtly.
There's no ands, if, or buts about it. His campaign was announced with like QAnon hashtags and some campaign worker wearing a QAnon shirt standing behind him. And then he also just, he started kind of interacting with me on Twitter because I was like highlighting how he was at this QAnon, not festival, but conference. Yeah,
that conference over the weekend. Yeah, right.
So he spoke there with just QAnon folks from all around the country, and that was where General Flynn was calling for a Myanmar style or Burma style coup in the United States. And Meehan himself, took a photo and posted it on his website of him, him with General Flynn, right? And Flynn is like a hero to to Bucks County right. I mean, so for example, Jim Worthington, the owner of the Newtown Athletic Club, he posted photos with Flynn when he was in D.C. in December. Keep in mind, Flynn's been taken off Twitter because of his QAnon links, right? And as a lot of folks in Bucks County have been following, so Jim Worthington, besides being the owner of the NAC, right, he used to run this this pro-Trump organization called People for Trump, and Worthington bussed a bunch of locals down to D.C. on January 6th, and got into some hot water for it because Move On and a local man kind of started a petition. Just kind of highlighting what, in fact, Worthington was responsible for doing, and as a result, he lost some business for it. Now, he's trying to strike back. Right. He kind of he started filed this slap suit, right? This frivolous lawsuit, which I despite the kind of the law that is in his favor, I think he doesn't have a leg to stand on, right? And Worthington, again, he is part of he's one of these grassroots thought leaders within the Republican Party locally. Never mind that he had Fitzpatrick on speed dial and it's bragged about it, about talking to him about not voting for the impeachment, right? And actually asked Fitzpatrick for legal advice because he was on the phone with him when the FBI showed up at his house. And
I mean, there's your connect. Well, and I think why this is especially concerning, right? And I apologize. We've already said this, but this is is one of these things that requires repeating, right, over and over again. Is that is where the energy is in the grassroots in the county, right? So, while we can look at like these public pronouncements from Meehan and Worthington and can be like, well, these folks are way on the fringe. The fact is, they're the ones who are organizing the foot soldiers on the ground. They're the ones who are doing the door knocking, right? And the mainstream Republican Party, who's had the the reputation in Bucks County as being fairly moderate, they don't have the ground game that Meehan and others have, and they've been publicly have talked about their concern about what's happening to the Bucks County Republican Party. Now, I'm the last person in the world that's going to try to let's say let's all get together and save the Bucks County Republican Party, right? If this is what they choose to do, let them die on the vine. But nonetheless, that's a concern kind of locally, and why it becomes important to be know who these people are.
Well, yeah,
and understand what they're doing.
They're trying to like infiltrate like all kind of organizations, including school boards. So like you said, you had like Cora Landis, this kind of bigoted
Right.
QAnon follower. She's since scrubbed some of her posts, and I've seen her kind of like react to people kind of bringing this up, and she's just like, oh, what I supposedly said. It's like, no, you said it. It's like, here it is.
Right. This is a reminder to all our listeners, like too as well. When you see these folks like make these outlandish proclamations on Twitter, all I got to say is screenshot that, right? Screenshot that and make sure you've got it, because this is just what one of these happens. Because this is what these folks do. They make these pronouncements and then they scrub it and they delete it and then they say that you're making stuff
and send it our way,
right?
well.
So, but this obviously follows into, and I don't want to spend too much. Yeah, and send it our way, absolutely, right? And 100%, like go over to Cyril's column, send it to him, head over to him, and cyrilmychalejko.substack.com. Make sure he gets it, and so we know that it's happening. So one thing that I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this also folds into some of the things that's happening in the Senate gubernatorial race already. What we see shaping up on the Republican side of the ticket.
Sure, I mean, if someone was like trying to suggest that we're engaging in hyperbole or just kind of exaggerating the radicalization of the Republican Party, just look at who the Republican Party is serving up as their top tier gubernatorial candidates. One, you have Lou Barletta, who's a well-known xenophobe and
Right.
bigot, and it looks like I don't believe it's official yet, but Mastriano is expected to kind of enter any day now. And there was a great New Yorker profile by Elisa Griswold about Mastriano's like far right Christian national politics. And if you haven't read that already, I know it's been mentioned on the show. Please do, and then check out the work of like PA Spotlight as well, who are covering all of this, all the issues and topics that kind of we've been talking about, and getting the information out there so that like national media can like pick up on this story. But yeah, so like back to the gubernatorial race, like this is like the cream of the crop of the Republican Party, like the far right extremists who believe in the big lie, right? And we know like Doug Mastriano is like part of the vanguard, in Pennsylvania, trying to still overturn the election and trying to push through, these just kind of like, these fake audits, right? Just kind of like looking for
Exactly.
any kind of like cheating that just doesn't exist. And he's even like, suppose that the Washington Post just had an article about this, and they were saying that, Mastriano like met with Trump.
It was an excellent article.
Trump last month, and was saying he could engineer an audit in the state still, and I'm sure like he's jockeying for Trump's blessing or endorsement, for the gubernatorial race. I'm sure that's part of his shtick. But then like, we know that like Trump is still like telling people that he thinks he's going to be like reinstated as president in August, which is just bizarre and dangerous, right? Because it's just keeping up this lie. It's just like feeding into this lie that a good portion, probably a majority of the Republican population of the United States still believes in.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the majority of the Republicans are kind of buying into this, and this is what polls continue to show. And I encourage everybody to, if you have not been following Chris Hayes' show, All In with Chris Hayes, on his weekly thing, do check that out. What he did last week with Mastriano and others, and what he's been following for this week about the attack on democracy. So you have that at the national level, and then what kind of you see Cyril doing, and you see a lot of other, like PA Spotlight you mentioned too, is focusing on where this is happening locally, right? Because obviously, we can get all concerned about what's happening nationally, but we actually have power when it comes to addressing these things locally, right? And making sure we're engaging there. So we only got a few minutes left today, so I want to make sure we get a chance to kind of hear what you got cooking, what's in the hopper, what you got, what you're looking into for your next
just
column.
to unfortunately stay on the theme of extremism in Pennsylvania, given that it's Pride Month, one thing that's come to my attention, which I was shocked by, and I was a little embarrassed that I wasn't really quite aware of it, is that conversion therapy is still legal here in Pennsylvania, and essentially is like state-sanctioned torture or abuse of minors, right? 18 and younger. Now, while there's been like some municipalities and some towns that have kind of passed like resolutions.
Well, let's be clear. When we're talking about conversion therapy, when we're talking about conversion therapy, we mean like forcing kind of young folks to basically, like saying, okay, there's something wrong with you because you're gay, right, or you're trans, right, so that we are going to force you to become normal through this therapy process, right? This is kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about conversion
and
therapy,
it's
right?
sadistic and medieval. So I'm going to be digging into that, talking with some different folks. And that's what we'll have on the grill for next Thursday.
Well, fantastic. Well, any we'll look forward to that. That's for sure. Can't wait to be able to talk about it on the show. Now, of course, we're going to be back next Wednesday with another surprise show, right? Where Cyril and I will get together and think about some of the things that are not say directly related to his column, not directly what's happening out of the Raging Chicken elsewhere, but kind of teasing out maybe some of these international stuff. I've been looking what's happening in Peru this week. I've been following a whole bunch of stuff that's happening international, so we might get into some of that kind of stuff. We shall see. But one thing I want to do is let everybody know that we've got on this Friday show, Sean Kitchen, he's on vacation, so he won't be there. So I'm going to mix it up a little bit on this Friday. We're going to do a shorter version of what we do in the shorter version of the news roundup. We're going to focus on some key stories. And then I'm going to talk a little about what's happening here at Raging Chicken, and I'm going to give you a kind of a special feature of yet maybe another, say, monthly show that I may be doing, but we'll talk about that then. But in the meantime, also on Out to Coop Live, we got a killer lineup coming up here in June. On Monday, this coming Monday, June 14th, we've got Cory Doctorow. He's an amazing writer, kind of fiction writer, science fiction. He's an activist. He's got a book that just came out that's called, or came out last year, but it's called How to Destroy Surveillance Capitalism. We're going to be talking about that and some of his young adult fiction that takes up some of the same issues. Then on June 16th, just 2 days later, a special Wednesday version, we've got Kadita Kenner. She's the executive director of the New Pennsylvania Project, and she'll be talking about defending and expanding voting rights in PA. Perfectly timely. And then on June 21st, we've also got Erin Wallace. She's the owner of Devil's Den in Philadelphia and the co-leader of Philly's chapter of the Pink Boot Society. We're going to talk about craft beer's Me Too reckoning that's been kind of making its way through the media. And we also got 2 additional special shows that are going to be coming up in the following weeks, which I'll tell you about shortly, but I don't want to keep us too long here today. Cyril, man, as usual, it's always great seeing you, and we look forward to seeing what you got in the hopper for next week. You got it. So remind everybody, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Looking forward to seeing everybody on the airways and in the streets. We shall see you soon, everybody. Take care. See ya!